Welcome, everyone, to Project Resurrection, the podcast. I'm your host, Chaplain Sai Ali, aka the Chisel Chaplain. And tonight's guest is a dear friend of mine. He is a former NYPD Detective Sergeant for 20 years. He retired. 16 of those 20 years, my friend Dan Murphy served as a detective and detective sergeant. Dan's career spanned across many organizations within the NYPD. They include the Narcotics Division, Organized Crime Investigative Division, the Bronx Gang Investigative Division, the Major Case Squad. He responded to both World Trade Center bombings, the first one being February 26, 1993, and September 11th, 2001. After that, Dan served with the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Dan's awards, and the one award out of all your many awards, the one award that stuck out at me was the 2003 recipient of the National Association Police Organization's Top Cop Award, given by our old friend John Walsh of America's Most Wanted in Washington, D.C. Dan has mad creds. And also, like me, he went to the corporate side of the house as I transitioned from the military. Dan transitioned from the NYPD. Some of his corporate stops include the Bank of New York, where Dan served as a financial crimes and fraud investigator. He also served, and we could talk about Albertson and Super Value because we got some shared history there, but Dan served as a director of corporate supply chain and global security investigations. Dan has also served as vice president, chief security officer for U.S. Bancorp. Dan is also the co-author of the book Workplace Safety, Establishing an Effective Violence Prevention Program. And he's currently the associate director at 360 Security Services. But most importantly, my dear friend Dan Murphy, like me, is a recovering alcoholic and a mighty, mighty servant of God. Please welcome to the show, my friend, Dan Murphy. Welcome, brother.
Thank you, Sai. Thank you, my brother. What a great introduction. I don't know who that guy is, but he's impressive. Thank you very much. Thank you for that warm introduction. And yes, we are good friends, and we've become better friends in the past year or two since we started connecting on this level, which has been really wonderful for me.
It has, man. And we'll get into that. I want to kind of just work up to that, but it's just a great story that we can share when we get into that portion of it, how we connected with each other. But now I asked you earlier, I figured you grew up in New York, but I didn't know which borough. And you sent me the message that you grew up in Queens, which our listeners will probably, if they can hear you talk, they know that you're a New Yorker through and through.
It comes out.
Yeah. What was life what was life in the Murphy household growing up in Queens?
Sure. I grew up mostly on 38th Street off Greenpoint Avenue on the border of Long Island City and Sunnyside. Very blue collar, very working class neighborhood. It was work, church, school, home. I mean, this is, the schoolyard. It was an interesting place. I grew up Catholic, and the Catholic Church was dominant in the area. You went to that church. You were an altar boy. You did everything you were supposed to do. And on Sundays you had better be in a pew there, or one of the nuns or priests from the school. They knew you weren't there if you didn't go. They didn't play.
I'm sure.
We didn't have a lot of money. My father was a civil servant. He worked for the Transit Authority, and he was a self-taught electrician, and he was a former Marine, Korean War veteran, and he had an alcoholism problem, which permeated my house and left a very distinct impression upon me about a lot of things. But he beat it. The Lord helped him, and he beat it when I was 13. He never took another drink until he died, and it was a whole new experience. But my neighborhood was there was a mafia presence. There was the typical 1970s elements of drugs in the schoolyard park. Crime. There was a lot of stuff going on in that neighborhood at the time. I remember as a kid even walking past crime scenes. People had been mugged and killed at night and stuff like that. Or actually, a little crazy story close to home. My father had rented out. We grew up in this little tiny wood frame house in Western Queens. And it was an 1860s farmhouse, believe it or not. And it was 2 levels, a legal 2-story. Each floor was about 600 square feet. It was small.
Right.
And we lived on the first floor. My father rented the second out of necessity. And he rented it to 2 mafia wise guys, 2 young guys who were kind of, fledgling. and we didn't really know that at the time. We found out about it later, but they made it into like their little party pad, and they would make noise and keep us up. And my father would just say, "It's okay. They pay cash. Leave them alone." Um, and that was life. I mean, we didn't have air conditioning, and on hot summer nights, and it was always a muggy summer night in New York.
Yeah.
Window would be open in our little bedroom. My brother and I shared with bunk beds, and it would face right out to the back of the Three Jolly Pigeons bar. Now, the drinking hours in New York City go till 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So now you're an 8-year-old kid. You're trying to get sleep. You're hot. You're sweating. The window's open, and all you can hear 50 feet away is people laughing, drinking, fighting, music. It was a wonderful upbringing for that. I could sleep through a hurricane at this
I
point
bet
because,
you could. I bet
yeah.
you could.
And we were
That
a
is
couple blocks from the train, the elevated subway. So you heard that at night going
right.
by. It was a very rich, I look back on it now, it was a lot of great experiences because I was not sheltered from life,
I'm
not
sure.
sheltered from the world. Up to and including, we had our home burglarized one time. I came home and the front windows of the doors is popped out and stuff is missing. And we had a car stolen when I was 18, working a well, I was 13. I got mugged and knocked unconscious on the subway system. New York City was really awash in crime in the 70s. So it was bad.
Yes.
And growing up in the city as a kid, I lived on a subway. We didn't have a car till I was 13 or 14. So, I'd take the subway by myself at 13 places. And I would never put my kid through that nowadays, but it's just the way it was.
Yeah.
Everybody around you was doing the same thing.
Exactly. Hey, now, any other family members in law enforcement, or was it just you out of the family?
Well, actually, yeah, my brother and I, he came on the job about a year after I did. He's a year older than me, actually.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And my uncle was the biggest influence. My mother's sister's husband, a guy named Jack Cassidy, rest in peace, Jack. One of the most decent, honorable people you will ever meet in this life was Jack Cassidy. Great man. Happy with anything. I mean, a child of the Depression, if you gave him 2 cents, he'd be like, "Oh, I can do something with this." He was always
Wow.
in a good mood,
Yeah.
very much a man of faith, very much just a decent, honorable person. He did 37 or 38 years with the NYPD,
Wow.
and he was very influential to me. He was the kind
Okay.
of guy I said, that's a good man. And when I was a kid, he was my surrogate father
Okay.
because many times with the issues in my home, we stayed at my aunt and uncle's house in Brooklyn with my cousins because we needed to get out of the environment.
Right.
So he was always there for us. And yeah, and I remember being about 20 years old and I was at a family barbecue and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. And I was studying communications, kind of studying at Queens College. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought radio would be
Right.
the thing. And then somebody said, dummy, you have a Queens accent. Nobody was going to hire you to be in radio or,
Right.
so I was talking to him and he basically said, take the police test. They'll pay for you to finish your college, everything. I said, really? So I took it and I did well, and it sparked an interest in me in serving people in that respect. But also when I was young, I was 21 years old, so it was exciting.
Right. Oh, I mean,
It
I
was
can imagine.
New York was out of control. There was no shortage of crime and craziness, and I had grown up in it, so I was familiar with it, and it just was, to me, it clicked, and I had a great, great time. He was my biggest influence on my uncle.
So it's good to hear that you had some family influences. I
Mhm.
was going to say, I imagine you guys being like blue bloods, like everybody sitting at the dinner table.
That is common though. There's a
It really
lot of
is, isn't it?
family. Oh man, I knew people whose whole family, three brothers, father, uncle, grandfather, everybody,
Yeah.
maybe it's lack of imagination. Maybe it's a form of Irish slavery, whatever it was,
Right.
we
Right.
made our way there because it becomes a lifestyle you become
Yes.
acquainted with.
So when you got started, I take it you started in the patrol division. Where
Absolutely.
where were you based out of? Which precinct were you out of when you first started?
Came out of the police academy, went to the 90th precinct in Brooklyn, which is Williamsburg.
Okay. Okay.
Also covered Bushwick, the 83rd, and Greenpoint, the 94th. Covered those three precincts. Primarily worked in the 8-3 and the 9-0, which were very busy at the time.
Okay.
Now, right now, Williamsburg is a trendy hipster place.
Very trendy, right?
Oh yeah. Now
Yeah.
you couldn't even touch real estate. Well, in 1984, when I stepped on the street there in uniform for the first time, it was a heroin-infested, crime-ridden neighborhood.
Yeah.
And we dealt with all the effects that go along with that.
Got you.
Mhm.
Got you. How were some of the partners that you had? What was now, and talking with you guys, I got a relationship with, a lot of you guys. The
Mhm.
stories that you and our good friend John O'Boyle told and the
Mhm.
impersonations were just simply legendary to
Yeah.
me. But what about some of the partners you had? I'm sure you
Oh
had some
man.
characters as partners.
I had training officers when I had, oh my gosh, partners. Absolutely. Well, John O'Boyle is one of them, of course, one of the funniest human
Yes,
beings that's
yes,
ever
yes,
been
he is.
born. He's just
Absolutely.
naturally hysterical. I think he would say things at times that I would just want to throw up laughing because it's so appropriate at that
I
moment.
know. I
And
know.
but I had training officers when I first came out of the academy. These guys were burnt to a crisp from
Were they?
years and years of being on the street,
Yeah.
and they were decent guys and very good cops, but they were so cynical and
Mhm.
so sort of twisted in their viewpoint on life and people because they had been inundated with craziness and crime and aggression all day long, violence all around them for 20 years, and
Right.
they don't look at things the same way we do. They stand over a homicide victim at a crime scene smoking a cigarette, telling a joke. I mean, because they're so used to it.
And
And I was,
you see that depicted in movies and things. So it is
yeah.
true. They're very
Oh, it is.
jaded.
It is true. And when I first came out, it shocked me a bit because, seeing human beings in various state of death and all that other stuff, the stuff that happens to people was common. But it
Right.
was, even though I had seen a little bit growing up, not like I saw when I came in the department. All of a sudden, I got a front row seat to what human beings can do to human beings, and I saw it regularly. At first, it's shocking, and then after a while, you start to get somewhat used to it.
Got you.
Um, yeah, but it's
That's
yeah,
tough. That's
it's an eye opener. I call it the bubble bursting. You become a cop in New York City in the '80s, and your bubble bursts pretty quickly. No matter
I
what
can
you thought
imagine.
about, yeah, you think about goodness in people, and there's lots of it. There's a lot of evil side. We know that.
Now, at what point did you look at this and say, you know what, I'm going to be successful at this? What was your advancement steps like? What
You
was your
know,
what was your what was your first promotion? You kind of thought to yourself, man, this is going to be okay.
yeah, I think the transfers in moving towards promotion to detective were critical for
Okay.
me. I when I first went on the job honesty site, my neighborhood, becoming a cop or a firefighter, were very, very good jobs. They were viewed as very solid. You've arrived, you've got a pension, you've got benefits, you've got stability, respect. It was a big thing in my neighborhood. It was like it
Right.
become like, oh wow, that's good,
Yeah.
And so I didn't know where to go from there. I had no
Mhm.
idea what existed in the police department beyond putting a radio car, getting in a radio car uniform and responding to calls. And then I saw other things as I got on: plain clothes, narcotics, detectives, all this kind of stuff, more interesting kind of work. And I wanted to do that.
Right.
And when I had about 3.5 years, a little less than 4 years with the department, I got very lucky, and I managed to know somebody who got me in for an interview to go to the warrant squad, warrant division, which was chasing wanted felony fugitives, which was
Okay.
pretty exciting work for me. I learned how to do basic detective work, how to find people. I got to run around the city, all over the city in plain
Right.
clothes. Um, and it was a great step up. It moved me towards becoming a detective. So my first promotion, I went from there to the narcotics division in Brooklyn at a time when it was that stretch of real estate in Brooklyn North that I worked in was the most homicide-ridden area in the world. It was more dangerous than Beirut during the battles that happened back there. You
Really,
know,
Dan.
per capita and per square mile. Well, I'll give you an example. The 75th precinct, which was nicknamed, every precinct in New York City has a nickname. It was nicknamed the Killing Fields. It led the city in homicides every year. Now, New York City has 76 police precincts. This is
Right.
just one. And this one in Brooklyn was maybe 3 square miles in size, and 120 murders a year in 3 square miles. I
That's
mean,
amazing.
and who knows how many non-fatal shootings, another 200 or so.
Right.
You could die from lead poisoning just walking around those neighborhoods
Oh
because
boy.
it's so much, and it was
Yeah.
all drugs, and it was really urban decay. So
Mhm.
I got transferred. I got promoted to detective in December of 1990 there, and that was just, for me, it was an awesome, awesome moment because I had always respected what NYPD detectives were known to be and stood for, and the types of cases they worked. And I soon found out it honestly, it really is probably the most respected individual police shield in the world.
I bet it
Uh,
is. I bet it is. I'm not even remotely surprised to hear you say that.
I tell you a really quick story about that. One of the times really shocked me when I was working in a task force with the DEA, and I had a case that I developed that took me over to Hong Kong. And I ended up doing undercover work in Hong Kong. And I thought to myself, look at this face. It says map of Ireland. It says NYPD on it. I had to go 10,000 miles side to
Right.
meet somebody who didn't know I was a cop. And then, of course, I had them talk themselves into an American prison by, negotiating a transfer of money and everything. But make a long story short, I'm sitting there in the DEA office in Hong Kong the day before my DEA partner and I are coming back to America. We finished all our work over there. They had a big luncheon on Friday afternoon saying thank you to the Australian guys they worked with who are going home. And
Okay.
they wanted to sort of honor us for the work that we did. And so, the head of the office stands up and introduces us, talks a little bit about the case. And he says afterwards, he goes, "Oh, thank you." And everybody clapped. And when it broke, about 20 people came over to me and nobody went over to my DEA partner because, NYPD detective, it
Of
has that
course.
weight around the world. And
It
it really,
you're
it
yeah, you're
surprised
like
me.
a rock star in law enforcement, the complete
Yeah,
rock star.
it was gratifying, but also I was unnerved by, it's like, I don't know how to take this. I'm just some knucklehead that, likes to pick up some people when they deserve it.
I'm not surprised to hear you say that though, because honestly, you and I have spoken before,
Hmm.
and I did a lot of traveling all over the world and all over the states, and I've worked with all these different law enforcement entities, and even in South Africa and over in Europe and in Africa, I've worked with all these different law enforcement and special forces guys, but the most
Hmm.
enduring individuals are the NYPD detectives, the men and women of NYPD. It's just something about the city and your shared experiences that just rocked me. And I couldn't get enough of it. I'm sure you guys, when we were traveling together, it was like, if Cy keeps asking about these stories and asking us to do these impersonations, we're getting sick of him.
Oh man, impersonations. Yeah. There's so many characters. New York City with 10 million people and 40,000 cops. You meet so many interesting characters, and some of them are just so imitatable, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word. And,
Yeah.
and John, of course, is incredible. He has an ear for picking up somebody's accents or tone and just goes with it. And he
Amazing.
used to call people up and transfer people over the phone, pretending to be a captain, because everybody believed him.
He would be the best at doing the pretext for voice on the phone, because he can do
Oh yeah.
so many foreign accents, and
Oh yeah.
Lieutenant Mercado, his lieutenant, I mean, just had me on the floor, had my
Yeah.
stomach hurting. Just phenomenal.
Yeah. I,
Phenomenal.
I had so many laughs working with him. Absolutely. Oh
I'm
my gosh.
sure.
And other
Now,
people too. I work with some very naturally
oh,
funny
I'm
people.
sure.
Mhm.
I'm
Go ahead,
sure.
Cy,
No,
please.
no, I'm sorry. I just love hearing these stories. You know that. But
Hmm.
now I did not realize until I saw your bio. I knew that you had responded to the World Trade Centers on 9/11. I
Hmm.
did not know that you responded on February 26, 1993. So
Sure.
you
Hmm.
were at both. You were right there as a first responder.
Hmm.
Where were you based? Where were you out of for the first one in 1993? Were you
I,
down in
I,
Lower Manhattan or no?
I was in Manhattan. I was actually in a task force with the DEA, Drug Enforcement
Okay.
Administration, working out of their building on the Lower West Side of Manhattan at an address I won't give.
Okay.
And it really wasn't that far. It was a 5, 6 minute drive down there. And
Okay.
basically, when something like that happens, it's all hands on deck. Everybody get in the car, see what we can do.
Right.
And while it was bad, it paled in comparison to 8 years later.
Sure.
But an interesting thing enough to me was February 26th, 1993 was my daughter's second birthday. So I missed the little kid get together for her birthday because I was down there for hours.
Right.
And then 9/11 2001 was my 39th birthday.
Wow.
So, I feel like bin Laden, could you pick on somebody else's family's birthday?
Exactly.
Could you have done?
Exactly.
Yeah. So those events and those dates are, emblazoned in my mind because of the date and what it meant to me on another level.
Yeah, I didn't realize you had those two backstories.
Hmm.
Going down for the first one, what did you have in your mind that what you were going to be walking into? Did you have any idea for the first one? It was actually pretty sturdy of an attack. You saw the smoke billowing out, and you guys coming
Yep.
out from the bottom of one of the
Mm.
the garages. What were
Right.
you? What was your mindset when you responded to the first one?
Well, the first one, as with any event like that, there's so many people already there before you get there.
Okay.
And by the time we got there, we were parking, 2 blocks away, getting out. putting on our raid jackets to be identifiable. What can we do? And the black smoke and everything. It's having been at scenes of many fires in my career before that, I wasn't taken back by the smoke so much. I was just
Okay.
taken back by kind of the enormity of what had happened. Somebody had put a
Right.
bomb in the parking area between the two towers, trying to impact both of them. And it was shocking because that's a bubble burst moment, right?
Sure.
We're
Right.
Americans. We're in America. This doesn't happen here.
Right.
But it's interesting. People forget. That human nature is to, well, that happened, but it's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
I remember there was, I think, 6 people died that day. My cousin was actually an architect for the Port Authority, which is the authority that oversaw the buildings and the whole properties.
Right.
And he was in one of the buildings, and he came down to go to lunch. And one of his friends from the building was one of the facility guys who had an office in the parking area down there. And he went down and asked him if he was going out to lunch. And his friend said, "No, I got some stuff to do. I'll catch up with you tomorrow." Well, he got killed. That gentleman got killed.
So, really, I never knew you, never heard you
Yeah.
mention that at all. I'm so sorry to hear that.
No, I my cousin was shook up by it, but he basically turned that into going to work at the center afterwards, at the World Trade Center, trying to rebuild it. And I remember him telling me after that attack, because he's an architect and he was so familiar exactly with how the building was structured and how it was, built, and what was strong about it, what was weak about it. He said that building is meant to withstand enormous amounts of stress, and the way it's built, it's not supposed to fall down. I mean, he was very confident that it was a safer building than ultimately we all found out that it was.
Right. Now let's fast forward to September
11,
September 11th.
2001.
Yeah, 2001. Were you were you still assigned with one of the task force on 9/11?
No, at that moment, I was a sergeant supervising detectives in a citywide investigative unit called TARU. It's the Technical Investigation. It stands for Technical Assistance Response Unit.
Okay.
And they do a wide variety of things in TARU. One of the most obvious things that they do is we do hostage negotiation work. We do all the technical work. We steal the phone lines. We set a variety of things up. We set up wiretaps. We bug cars, we bug homes, we set up trackers in cars, we wire up undercovers, wire up informants, set up cameras in covert locations for a variety of reasons. It's a lot of spy kind of work, and actually was very fun.
Yeah.
And so I was a sergeant there, and a great group of people, and it's the kind of unit that responds to just about everything big that happens.
Okay.
Because there's always some technical need somewhere.
Sure.
We had phenomenal videotape clarification capabilities, and so we did a lot of that work for detective squads. It allowed me to do a lot of different things, and it was fun. So that morning, because it's my birthday, I had taken the day off, because I learned long ago that when you are in any detective capacity in the NYPD, and it's a day that you want to do something that evening, and you go to work, forget it.
Right.
You've heard of Murphy, right? I'm the Murphy's Law. Absolutely.
Right. Exactly.
Which means if I'm getting off at 4 and I'm like, okay, I'll be home in an hour, we can do this. Nope. 5 minutes to 4, somebody's going to get three rounds in the head. The boss is going to come out and say, "Murphy, it's your case. Get on it," and I'm done. It's. So it wasn't bad to the extent that for me, that I was off and I was home, and I didn't actually get there until the towers fell.
Okay.
They had already fallen, because I lived up near West Point, straight up the Hudson River.
Got you.
And it was a bit of not far from where John lived.
Okay.
I live still. And what happened is I was with my first wife, and we put our kids on the bus, got them ready for school. Beautiful morning. We all know the story. It was a gorgeous day. Crystal clear, beautiful September. Absolutely. One of the things I love about September is those mornings.
Absolutely.
We went down to our local gym. We were going to work out. We had lunch plans. Kids were going to come home, take them to dinner. We had all this stuff planned out for the day. And needless to say, got to the gym and said hi to one or two people I knew who worked shift work in various places, other cops, whatever. And everybody's looking up at the TV. And I said, "Oh no, they're back." It's like the, what's that movie? Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They're back.
Yeah, exactly.
And the TV announcers are all talking about how they thought it was someone had maybe had a heart attack behind the wheel of a Cessna, a small plane. And when you looked at it, it didn't make sense. It was too big.
It really didn't. Yeah.
And so it was, okay, I got to go home. I got to go home. I got to put clothes in a bag and I got to get in the car. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
I realized I wasn't going to be necessarily coming home that night or every night. So I threw a
Sure.
few pairs of pants,
Okay.
just filled a bag up with stuff, got in the car. I had a department owned leased vehicle that I had a red cherry light for. And I was 50 something miles from the city border, but I just took off flying. And on the radio on the way in, I heard the first collapse.
Okay. Yeah.
And I almost literally had a heart attack because I knew I would know people who had been killed at that moment.
Absolutely, Dan.
I just knew it. I knew my unit was down there too. I knew that they were, and I was really worried about a lot of people, and it was impossible to get through the people on cell phones necessarily. All the cell towers had come down. So I was flying in, trying to get in, and as I tried to get in, the first bridge I came to cross over from the Bronx into Manhattan was shut down. What happened that morning is what happens when a lot of things happen, people who are crazy, who are sitting at home with nothing to do except I want to do something interesting. They pick up the phone and they call things in when everything else is going crazy. So we had on a typical day in New York City, we had 6 to 7 bomb calls come in within the city. Most of them are nonsense, but they
Right.
all have to be checked out.
Sure.
That day, within an hour after the first plane hitting, we had 137 bomb threats called in. The mayor's mansion, City Hall,
Wow.
Madison Square Garden,
Yeah.
this tunnel, everything had a bomb threat call, and everything
Right.
has to be checked out.
Exactly.
So that's how crazy that morning was. I finally convinced a captain I have to get in, and so I just drove over the bridge. They were going to search for stuff. I don't care. I drove over
Right.
the bridge. I made it downtown, and everything was just a mess from there. It was it was a feeling. The first time I saw, we called it the pile. The pile I will never forget.
Yeah.
It was so overwhelming that your senses can't take it all in. It's what am I looking at? This doesn't make. This is not supposed to be happening. Um, Now, those buildings, when they were built, I lived in Western Queens, as I said, and my neighborhood was a lot of construction workers, a lot of a local three, iron workers, electricians,
Mhm.
and everybody was working on the World Trade Center. It was the biggest construction project in New York City history.
Right.
And as a result, I watched those buildings go up. I heard the stories of the men working on them as they talked to my father on the stoop of our house. I It was a part of my life, a part of everybody's life in New York City, and everybody knew somebody who worked on the
Right.
project or worked there.
Yeah.
So everybody had that connection, and it felt like getting a gut punch. It's like somebody's holding your arms behind you and somebody's punching you in the stomach and you can't do anything about it. That's what it felt like. Because usually cops can go in and make a difference. We can make something better. That's
Yeah.
our job. Go into chaos, make it calm. We couldn't do anything about that, except try to find people.
Now, as far as the folks in your unit, were you
Mhm.
able, did you lose anybody out of your unit?
Nobody in my unit died directly. Since then, a number of them have died from various cancers. But
Yes.
um, that day, the only person who was really hurt badly was a young detective who didn't know he was hurt badly at first. Um, Not to be graphic, but when a plane explodes at that force, the human body the torso and the extremities tend to separate. It's
Right.
just a fact.
Yeah.
So a torso came flying out of the South Tower when the second building was hit, and a young detective named John was struck by the torso, kind of a glancing blow. It sent him head over heels in the street, and he had a bit of a concussion. And so he went to the hospital, and they checked him out, and they sent him home, and he was tired. Well, later that night, he got up to go to the bathroom, and he fell down. He lost muscular control because what happened is a very small piece of metal, very small, inserted itself deep into his cervical spine and was wreaking havoc with his central nervous
Ugh.
system.
Wow.
Um, he ended up being paralyzed, quadriplegic in a chair, and I'm not even certain if he's alive at this point. But
Oh,
that was the worst that hit our unit, which was pretty bad. But I knew other cops that got killed, and I ultimately knew 24 people very well
mhm.
who died that day. So
And that's, Dan, that was one of those days. I don't care. It's almost like when Kennedy got shot or Martin Luther King. I mean, I at least knew
yeah,
my,
yeah.
my parents and grandparents would always talk about what they were doing.
Hmm.
And that would be the day. And for me, I was, I was in Houston the night before doing a corporate investigative detail.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I had finally got cut loose September 10th that night. We were living in Alexandria, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so happy to get home because I was on the road for like 3.5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember flying, and it was so surreal that evening because we were flying and we were just like navigating through storms, Dan, but there was
Mm-hmm.
no turbulence at all. And I was like, man, this is like an amazing flight. And I
Mm-hmm.
got back into DC late that night. So my wife let me sleep in that night, and she got the kids. I mean, I think Cy had went to a babysitter, and Sammy was only in second grade in the school in
Mm-hmm.
Alexandria. So my wife let me sleep in, but she came and woke me up, and she was like, look at this. And I think it was NBC, and it was Matt Lauer and them. And she said the same thing that you had said. She said, they said it's a small plane. And I'm looking at the indentation of the building, and I'm
Yeah.
like, there
Right.
is no way
Right.
that's a
Mm-hmm.
Cessna. And then like a few minutes later, you see the other plane. And I didn't know what to do, Dan. And I wrote a little bit about it. I didn't know whether to put on a business suit and wait for my corporate clients to call. And I was also in the Air National Guard at
Mm-hmm.
a security forces unit. I was a DC Air National Guard, but we were based in Andrews. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what do I do? And I just got compelled to put my military uniform on.
Mm-hmm.
And I kissed my wife and I said, hey, I'm going to go. I called my unit. I was like, what's going on? They're like, oh, we don't know. I said, are we being deployed? They're like, no. I said, I'm coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I was trying in the same in New York, there was no phone service because the plane, while I was getting showered, the plane hit the
Right.
Pentagon,
Right.
and we can hear it because we were in just like above Shirlington, which is just like south of the Pentagon.
That's
I'm
right.
like,
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
on earth? And Dan, I remember the traffic in Alexandria was gridlocked. And I didn't have, my weapons and everything was at the base, but I had my beret on and my badge and everything. And I got with an Alexandria cop and I was like, can I help you? Because he was struggling directing
Mm-hmm.
traffic.
Yeah.
And I helped him direct traffic. And he was like, man, I'm just hanging there with me until I get some help.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay, you can go, please. He's like, go, go to your base. We popped the salute, and I'm going across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and I'm looking upriver, and you could
Mm-hmm.
see the smoke, Dan, from the Pentagon.
Right.
And it was just like the most surreal day
Yeah.
that ever you could imagine. And then when I got to know you guys and listen to your stories, because I didn't know, and John doesn't mind, our friend John O'Boyle does not mind
Mm-hmm.
me speaking for him.
Mm-hmm.
When everything was over and we had a detail in lower Manhattan and we were in one of the smaller World Trade Centers, he and I got into an elevator, Dan, to go up to the top floor to meet our client. And I saw John was like a white as a ghost, and his eyes like had panic in it. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, I didn't say anything in the elevator to him until we got up to the top, and we had dinner that night and drinks as we were apt to do that night. And he
Mm-hmm.
told me the story, and
Mm-hmm.
he told me why he gets like so anxious in elevators because he was trying to come up and get out of the buildings and that. So, I mean, the stories that you guys shared was
Mm-hmm.
just incredible. But the stress and, like you said, the illnesses that precipitated
Right.
after that, the cancer and the
Mm-hmm.
toxic fumes down there. It was, you
Right.
guys went through a lot as a unit, and so did NY Fire Department too.
Oh
Same
yeah.
thing.
Yeah. It was yeah. You know, John's story is very compelling. He was buried under rubble for a while. They sent the car to go notify his wife he was gone, and he was found as the car was a few miles from his house, and it was a desperate attempt to get a hold of that car so they don't go knock on the door
Tell
and give
his
his
wife to
wife
tell Patty.
Patty,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, give
yeah,
her a heart attack, you know. So yeah, he
yeah.
tells that story, and John has had his moments of telling me that story when it has been very hard for him, very
Yes,
moving, and it was within the first couple of years afterwards. And I was glad I was with him and he had a chance to share because he's a friend, he's a brother, and I knew by him doing that he was showing me a lot of honor and love and respect that he would open up like
absolutely.
that because he's a very very proud man, John. You know,
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
uh, and I don't think in a bad way, in a good way. He
No,
wants to be seen
absolutely.
as strong, you know. But
Yes, absolutely.
the experience on a pile site, I take a lot of things from it. My unit was on the pile. I mean, on in under the pile, not 10 blocks away directing traffic for 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. I was there we had 12-hour shifts the first month. And then the second month, it was back to 5 or 6 days a week because we had
Yeah,
to peel back to start covering the city for hostage jobs or whatever else it was.
right.
But We spent so much time on that pile, breathed in so much stuff. But a couple of things I'll never forget. First of all, is how hot the metal was the first couple of days, because those fires are burning at 1,500 degrees underneath
Yes.
that pile. And
Right.
that's heating up all the metal you're walking on.
Right.
So the rubber soles of whatever boots you're wearing are going to start melting and sticking, and they did. So that was tough. It was tough navigating. The night it was, I got down there at around 11:30, 12, something like that, after the towers had fallen, and I didn't leave. That was Tuesday. I didn't leave till Thursday morning at about 8. So that was
Wow.
a
Yeah.
mad. None of us were going anywhere because there's people that
No.
could still be saved. It's
Right.
it's pure.
Yeah.
You were operating on adrenaline, and it was just a remarkable feeling of we have the only thing we can do here is to try to find somebody alive or dead for their family, preferably alive, and we're not going to stop until we do that. And it
Right.
was it was rough because there was a lot of people there who had brothers, sisters, cousins, rescue workers
Right.
under the pile,
Yeah.
and firefighters were passing out rather than leave. They were, I'm not sleeping, I'm not leaving my
Yeah.
brothers under there, so that was very, very rough and very personal. But there's a lot of bad that can be said about what took place down there, but I can tell you God is present everywhere. You know that as much as I do.
Yeah.
He's present everywhere. And here's how he was present at the World Trade Center. Well, obviously he's present everywhere. The most visible way to me was in the response by the world, I'll say, to help and support us as we were doing
Right.
our work.
Yes.
The volunteerism, the donations,
Yep.
the outpourings of support, love, and just general encouragement were everywhere.
Right.
You couldn't miss it. It was everywhere. You come off the pile. I was bringing my team off the pile every couple of hours. Bathroom, water, eye washes, respiratory treatment, all that stuff was right there.
Yeah.
You'd come off the pile and 25 feet away, there'd be tables set up with respiratory therapists. Sit down, we're going to clean your lungs out. Really? Nebulizers.
Yeah.
10 feet away from that, put your head back, eye washes, and all of a sudden you could see again because all that dust and everything was clinging to your eye.
Right.
You name it, it was there. And we would go to Stuyvesant High School a few blocks away every now and then, but I would take them off every 4 hours to get that check.
Yeah.
Let's get a sat phone, call your home,
Right.
let them know you're okay.
Yeah.
You need food. You haven't eaten, you need food. I'm not hungry. You need food. As a boss, that was one of my biggest responsibilities, was
Good for
ensuring
you.
them you have to. And it's something you learn about leadership under the gun, so to speak.
Right.
I had learned it before, hard ways and various things that happened in the police department, but I really knew that time, we have got to look out, watch for them, because mental health issues, very traumatic.
Right.
I don't care who you are, you're behaving differently if you are there long enough. If you were there when the buildings fell, you're dealing with a lot. So I had one of the members of my team who was a very tough guy, a very proud guy, and a very tough guy who was there when the buildings fell, who had to shoot out windows and jump through it with a crowd of people, and who was shaken by it, as anybody would be.
Right.
But he was shaken by it, but he's not the kind of guy that would ever say anything about it. His partner, his good friend, another very tough guy, comes up to me on the pile the night of the 11th, and he says to me, Murph, he's not doing good. I said, what do you mean? He's not doing good. I said, oh, yeah, he's scared. I said, well, we're all kind of scared, but he's got reason to. Okay. I had to find something for him to do. And I had to find something for him to do that he was good at, he could be successful at, and it kept him off the pile directly. And one of the things this guy was famous for was, if you told him, I need you to find me $1,000 worth of steaks, he'd be like, I'll be right back. He was a procurement specialist. He would liberate things. He would find things anywhere. So I said to him, I'll call him Tom. Tom, we really need lines of power for our machinery, because we had equipment. We were using microphones and cameras, dropping them down into void areas, trying to find people. I said, we need power above anything else. Finding power down there wasn't easy.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Everything's blown out, but we had enough extension cords. We had all kinds of line. Well, he found power, and that was his thing, to ensure we kept the power. And he found it in the back off generators behind the fire department station that was right there on the south side of the complex. Okay. And he's such a schmoozer. He ends up like talking to the firefighters for hours on end, but he's getting us what we need and he's keeping his face.
Yes,
And that was,
absolutely.
I remember that because, not because I did such a great thing. I remember it because it's a lesson in how to deal with people at traumatic situations.
Sure.
Even though people say, well, he's an NYPD detective, doesn't matter. He's a human being.
Exactly.
And he just witnessed something historic that almost took his life. You've got
Yes.
to be there for him, right? So
Yes.
anyway, that's what stands out to me is the
Yeah.
volunteerism. And one more quick story is it was the night of the 11th or the 12th. At this point, I do not remember. All I know, it was hot on the pile because of the stuff coming up. It was dark. We hadn't got full light up there. And at one point, I'm sweating. We're all sweating, going down into the areas. We got smoke in our face. On top of the pile, and it took a while to get into the pile. It was at least 8, 10, 12 stories high of debris, metal, and twisted and rebar. And at one point, a guy grabs my arm, and he's a guy wearing, I look over, he's wearing surgical scrubs. And he goes, "I'll stitch you." I said, "Who are you and what are you talking about?" He said, "I'm a doctor from St. Vincent's, which was the main receiving hospital for anyone injured."
Okay.
Problem was, after the first initial rush, there was nobody going in there because everyone was dead. So they're sitting up there like the Maytag repairman with nothing to do. And he decided to get in his car and come down and walk the pile and see what and it was really nice of him to do. I
Right.
said, "You want to stitch me for what?" He goes, "Look at your arm." I had hit a piece of rebar without knowing it. No sleep, adrenaline, focus, everything going on, craziness. I didn't even realize I had a cut from my wrist to my elbow.
Wow.
Very thin, but it was bleeding, mixing with my sweat, bleeding all over my pants and my shirt. I had no idea. No idea. And I looked at him, I said,
That adrenaline is something, isn't it?
yeah, it'll pull you through a lot of things, but at some point you got to deal with what actually happened,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So it was really nice of him. I told him I don't want to leave the site and sit down any place. He goes, I said, "Can you just butterfly me, like
Mhm.
clean it off?" And he did, and he wrapped it
Yeah.
up nicely and cleaned it, and it healed well. But then he just took off. I never got his name. He just went back to doing his thing, and I thought to myself, God works, right? God
Yes,
works.
he
He
does.
sends people places at times, and I will never forget that. I'll never forget so many things. But anyway, I'm rambling
That's
at this point.
you're not. I mean, I'm just captured by it. And I knew when you agreed to be on that I really wanted to hear your take and how you handle that and how those around you handle that. Because again, our good friend John O'Boyle told me his.
Mm-hmm.
And I was captivated. I was in DC and I didn't have to go through that and I got activated. But the only thing, and we can end at least that portion on this, Dan, that night,
Mm-hmm.
I am out on the flight line at Andrews Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
And it was beautiful up and down the coast that
Mm-hmm.
day. It
Oh
was
yeah.
gorgeous. And that night, I'm looking out, and our only thing that was up were our F-15, our F-16, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't scramble that morning. They were just sitting on the pad with nothing, no armament on it. I
Right.
think the F-15s that scrambled either came from Boston, like Hanscom Field, or Langley in Hampton, Virginia. But
Mm-hmm.
that night, our planes finally, they were just on a patrol mission. And I looked up, Dan, and the DC area is like New York. It's crowded airspace. There
Yeah.
was
Mm-hmm.
nothing flying that night but a KC-10 tanker
Mm-hmm.
refueling those F-16s. And it was just such a surreal moment. But
Yeah.
I'm glad. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, our listeners and viewers, I'm sure they want to hear that. They want to hear somebody from the ground. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story too, because one of the
It's
things that
minute, Danny, compared to yours, but it's a
no,
shared
it's
experience.
you know what, you're a servant and you jumped to action, and that's what matters, and all of it matters. Everything everybody did mattered, and it all added up to be a cumulative response that brought us back from that moment. One of the things that I will never forget, and I'll share this with you only quickly. I don't know F-16 from F-15. I was
Mhm.
not in the Air Force. You know that better
Right,
than me.
right.
But I do recall sometime the first time I heard it, the night of 11, standing on a pile and hearing them go overhead, which is to hear the sonic boom.
Yes.
Scared the heck out of me, Si.
Sure it did.
I'm not
I'm
used to that
sure
like
it
you
did.
are. I thought
I
we're getting hit
know.
again. We were
I
looking at each other and said,
know.
"What the heck?" And one of the
I
guys I was with,
know.
my team was a Marine. He goes, "It's okay. We're being protected. Don't worry about it." I was like, "Oh my
Yes.
gosh." But I was never
Absolutely.
so glad to hear something that loud overhead, because I knew the U.S. military, Air Force, whoever it was up there was watching us.
We were on
And
it. Absolutely.
I could focus on my job. It was so nice
Yes.
to know,
And speaking, you mentioned a key word, being a servant. And
hmm
your corporate background is your corporate background. You've done a lot of
hmm
great things, in the corporate space. And just a quick story, your stop at Albertsons and Super Value. I know you remember this because I was assigned to the CEO down in DC
That's right.
prior to him coming to New York.
hmm
And the CEO, and I won't mention his name, but was really digging my style and my
hmm
my driving techniques and everything. And actually, he went to his security chief at the time and said, "I want you to hire Cy." And they approached me, Dan, and
Yeah, yeah.
I was intrigued by it, and until I found out that they were based in Boise, Idaho.
hmm
And I discussed it with my wife that night, and she looked at me when I said, "Hey, it's in Boise, we have to relocate." She looked at me like I had four heads.
Yeah.
So I obviously, me relocating to Boise was not an option. But I heard,
Yeah. No.
subsequently that they offered it to you, and your wife lovingly agreed, and you ended up going there. And that kind of, started your corporate career because you had many great stops. And you're the right mind for
Oh,
anything
thank you.
security and risk assessment. But you mentioned the word servant,
hmm
and I wanted to tell our listeners and our viewers that you and I had a conversation sometime in the year 2020. And I just
hmm
happened to randomly call you. And I
hmm
remember I was still up in the state of Washington.
Right.
And I told you, after we exchanged pleasantries, I told you that I had stopped drinking. And I think I
hmm
told you that I had that little episode. I had the DUI, which went away, but
hmm
I was so upset with myself that night. I considered myself a professional driver, Dan.
hmm
And this young kid pulled in front of me, and I'm sure my reflexes were not as sharp as they needed to be. And I hit the
Right.
kid from behind, and I had a lot to drink, got cuffed, got put in jail. I got bailed out within 2 hours, but I had that orange jumpsuit on for 2 hours.
hmm
I told myself that night, I said, "This is ridiculous." And I went back to the house, and I told my brother and sister, who I called them, who I was sharing that house with, and she bailed me out. And I told her, "I'm never drinking again." And I'm sure
hmm
Catherine Fath looked at me and said, "You've got to be kidding." But that night, March 1st, 2020, and I just celebrated my 2 year sobriety.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I stopped drinking, Dan. I picked up my mom's Bible, and then, like a week later, I was just jarred out of my bed, like 3 a.m., and the hair on my forearms were standing up. And I thought maybe Mount Rainier had erupted or something, but
hmm
that was my epiphany. That was God saying, "Write what happened to you, years past when I was battling PTSD." And
hmm
then I wrote it, and then I started taking seminary classes. And I think I was at my 8th month sobriety when I called you, I think. And you were really quiet on the phone when I was talking to you. And then you told me that you had stopped drinking. And we were both quiet. And I got to be honest with you, I was in tears because I thought,
Mm,
my goodness, what was this God? If any, this was
yeah,
God compelling me to call
absolutely.
you. And then you shared your story, and we talk about Project Resurrection. How
hmm
did you see, where were you at that point when you had stopped drinking? And what was it that happened that made you say, "Okay, I got to make a change of plans here"?
Well, full transparency, side, I still occasionally struggle with it.
As we all do, Dan.
Yeah,
It's a work.
but I think it's part of an overall thing with me, and I'll go back to a couple of things in my life that were kind of turning points. One of them was my son's complex Tourette syndrome, which was very, very bad for about 8, 9 years. He tried to take his life in front of me with a knife, and it, the fact that I do know how to disarm people was helpful, and I never thought I'd have to
Okay.
disarm my son using body weight against him and a lot of
Right.
stuff. But I had to, and it was a terrible, tragic moment. But just like you, a couple of weeks later, I was a different person. PTSD came over me like a tidal wave takes over a beach. I was totally different. The anger was coming out of my pores. I couldn't even look at my ex-wife. I was so angry at her for so many things. I was venting it and putting it on her and on myself. And I went into a self-destructive phase, and it was not good. Drinking too much, got separated, moved towards divorce, was trying to go get counseling, but not really serious about it. I was numb all the time, sleeping 2 hours a night, having panic attacks, having flashbacks, having a lot of things that I was not prepared to deal with because I didn't even know what it was. Or
Right.
is that part of this? Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'd never considered I would need that before, but I learned that all those experiences in life that were sitting there in your brain had not been filed away properly. They were just sitting there. And when that triggering moment for me was my son's suicide attempt. And the next thing I know, everything came out. Now I got to deal with everything. And I'm a changed person. How do I deal with that? How do I go from feeling like I'm in control of my life, which was all a facade?
Right.
It was all a charade, me telling myself, yeah, you're fine. No, I wasn't.
Right.
I wasn't. I had a lot of traumas in my existence between growing up, my police career, just in general. A lot of people have traumas in life, and
Sure.
they accumulated, and it was something I had to deal with.
Yeah.
So I started to take uh, things I had learned watching as a kid, which was my father and his friends drinking, and the sort of Irish bagpiping world that I grew up in, which my grandfather was a big part of, which drinking is a part of it. And it wasn't
Sure.
necessarily drinking to get drunk per se, it was just party.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of that. They loved gathering, they loved doing that. And my father became a very bad alcoholic, a functional one, though. He'd go to work and work
Mhm.
all day, never lost a
Right.
job.
Yeah.
But it was something that was, when you're surrounded by it as a kid, because you realize well, that's what adults do. And then at 21, I joined the New York City Police. Well, before that, as a teenager, of course, everybody I knew abused alcohol. It's what you did.
Right. Yeah.
And then I became 21, joined the NYPD, which, in my understanding, is probably the single largest drinking fraternity in North America,
I believe it is.
unless the Air Force has more. But
It's there too, but I believe
yeah.
that you got us maybe just by a small notch there.
And then I became a detective, which I learned at the time was also another subset of that drinking fraternity, which is, you're wearing a suit, so it's okay to stop and have a couple while you're working. Really?
Right.
I never even envisioned that. Okay, I found myself, my captain is taking me out. Come on, let's go have lunch.
Yeah.
He's buying beers for 5 hours. I mean, this was part of, and I didn't really use it at home much, but it was just kind of a
Mhm.
thing, like this is
Right.
what you do.
Yeah.
And then when the PTSD came out in me, I was looking for pain dulling medications, self-medicate. And alcohol was a natural thing to go to because it made me either feel good for a few minutes and then I'd go back to being numb because I was very numb. I'm sure you understand exactly what I'm talking
I
about,
know exactly what you're saying.
including that horrible feeling of not being able to feel love for people you love. You don't feel loving feelings, which to me was one of the saddest things about it. I look at my kids and go, I know I love you like crazy, but I don't feel a thing right now. And that's horrible. But so that's what I was doing. And uh, I ended up getting divorced, and I'm remarried now to an amazing woman who she's really the reason why I woke up and am still waking up slowly from the whole concept of hitting my pain with that.
Right.
I woke up, I had gotten into a habit of sitting at home just about every night, watching TV and drinking.
It's a
And
very natural thing, though, isn't it? I mean,
it's easy to fall into a habit, right? It's
yes,
easy to
same
fall.
here.
And that's what happened with me is I was like, yeah, well, if I have a 6 pack, why not drink all of them? And a little whiskey goes good with that too.
Sure.
It'll just help me sleep. I'll be fine. It was too much. And she tried talking to me, and I was as thick as a stump, and I still am in many ways. And she tried appealing to me. Well, the first part of our relationship, we went out quite a bit and drank and did all that stuff. And then at some point, it was time to be an adult, and I kind of didn't think I wanted to hold on to it. And a part of me still does, and I still fight with it. But
Yeah.
um, she was very instrumental. And I remember one night I sat here, not far from where I'm sitting right now, and I must have had, I don't know how many beers and some whiskey. And I just was kind of drank myself silly, and I went to bed. And I woke up at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And she was angry at me, and, because I wasn't listening to her, and she was watching me destroy myself. And I woke up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and something spoke to me and said, enough, enough of the craziness. Apologize to this woman who loves you. And it had to be God, because nobody else speaks to you like that, right? And I remember turning to her and saying, I'm done. And with that, the next day I went to an AA meeting. Now, I have not been great with it since then, but it's not like it used to be in my life.
Right.
And I want to make it completely gone, but I will. Anyway,
Hey, we
a
well,
part of it,
we're all still a work in progress, man.
yeah.
No
And,
matter
and
what.
you know what, Si, a part of it has to do also, and I'm not mean to interrupt, but um, to go back to, it's hand in hand with faith, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
hand in hand with faith. You can't be a drunk and be a good Christian. It doesn't work, because God specifically says, don't be a drunkard. Don't, it's not good. How many things have you done at 2 o'clock in the morning with a half a load on that you look back on and say, that was the smartest thing I ever did?
I'm so proud of that moment.
Yeah, yeah. Wish I could see that again on video.
Exactly.
If you're lucky, you
Exactly.
don't. But
Right.
so the faith walk was, my son had his turning point, his suicide attempt. And then at some point thereafter, the Holy Spirit and Jesus came to him in a way that changed him. He could have went two ways with his debilitating illness of Tourette's, where he was ticking constantly, getting made fun of. He had no friends. His life was horrible. Well, he could have went two ways. He could have went to dropping out, drinking drugs, and just trying to medicate himself, or faith to find strength.
Yes.
Well, he found faith. Jesus found him, and he is a believer to this, that we talk all the time about it. I get on the phone. My favorite conversations with my son are when we go to faith. We start talking about the Bible, the word, the meaning of this, that book, all that stuff. And it's just, he's not just well versed in it, he's passionate believer in Christ. And
Oh, what a blessing.
and you know what, Si, he influenced me. He's the reason I have to take it much more seriously now than I ever did in my life, because he showed me, um, I wanted to be in it with him, number one.
Right.
And I also saw what it was doing in his life. And I
Sure.
realized I was so broken, and I had hit the bottom. I was doing everything wrong, looking for the peace that only comes through our Lord and Savior, Jesus
Right.
Christ. That's it. You're not going to get it anyplace else. I'll be 60 this year. I know you're about my age, a little bit older, but hey, I won't, you're in better
Yeah.
shape than me. So you got
That's
that
it.
going.
I just got you
But
by a year. That's all. Just
yeah,
by a year.
that's right. We're close. But anyway, I look at my faith walk has been so enlightening, and I have found more peace. I'm not fully at peace. I still deal with demons. I still deal
Right.
with all of it. And I don't think I ever will not, because I'm a part of the human experience.
Sure.
But I now know that when I crack the Bible open and I turn to a psalm, if I'm down and I want to read a psalm, or if I want to go read something from the book of John or Matthew, I have a bunch of stuff out here, that some of the stuff that's influenced me greatly. There's just passages that I take to heart and I carry with me every day. For example, one of the things that reminded me of you when I was going over some of these earlier was Matthew 28:18-20. Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. This is the Great Commission. Go spread my word. And what I love about the Bible is it doesn't equivocate. It doesn't say, if you get a chance, if you're not too
Right.
busy.
Right.
It says go. And you, my friend, are living out the Great Commission. Matthew 28:18 is what you are doing. And I'm proud of you, proud to know you. And I am trying to get to the point where I'm doing it now. I find myself much more. It's been a walk. It's been a walk. It's
Yeah.
been a struggle for me, because at first I was so um, gun shy about
Right.
talking about faith with people. I'm going to
Yeah.
offend them. He's going to think I'm a
Oh,
Bible
right.
thumper, right? All
Right.
that crazy stuff. Now I'm like, whatever, dude.
Yeah.
I got Jesus with me. What do you got? I mean,
Absolutely.
I know who he is. I'm learning who he is. He knows me and every hair in my head. But the thing is, getting to the point, taking your faith to the point where you don't just accept Jesus and don't just say it and go to church, but you read the word, meditate on the word, learn the word, try to live the word,
Right.
and then understand that the reason what was given to us was not to put in our pocket,
Sure.
it's to share, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's why when I think of this passage, I think of you, because you are doing that with your ministry. And as I said, I couldn't be more proud to call you my friend, because that is what we're called to do. So I'm not going to be quiet about it. I'm the kind of guy that talks with people about it
Good for
anywhere I
you.
go. Happy to
And-
talk about faith with you. Happy to tell people. I get out of the car now, say something I don't think I ever would have did my whole life. And my father was a very generous guy. If he had $5 in his pocket and it was a homeless guy or a drunk on the street, he'd give it to him. I'd be the kid looking at him like, hey, I don't have any money either. But he
right.
but he
Yeah.
taught me a lesson. Hey, we've got a
Sure.
house, we've got food, be happy.
Yes.
He doesn't.
Exactly.
And so I now find myself giving money to people who look like they need it.
Good for
Not that I'm
you.
rich, but just because, oh man,
Yeah.
we are called to do that. Feed my people,
Yes.
clothe my people. If you pass somebody, if you got $100 and it's just burning a hole in your back, and you're walking down the street and there's a guy down on his luck there, but for the grace of God, go. Why? My father always used to
Yeah.
say, give him the money, give him half, give him
Yeah.
something, do
Right.
something, because that person is a child of Jesus, just like you, matters just as much to God as you do. And if you don't do that and you miss that opportunity, we're all going to meet him, right?
Yes,
We
we
are
are.
all going to meet Jesus. And I love these people who have no concept of that. And I really want to grab them and say, I now understand fully that I am going to meet him face to face. And he's
Yes.
going to want to know what I did with the skills he gave me, with the gifts, with the things he entrusted to me. What kind of a steward was I with them? And if I can't look at him, and well, first of all, he's going to know the answer anyway.
Sure.
What's my excuse going to be for, well, I needed more money. Uh, he finds a way to do things for us. But anyway, I'm
Well,
rambling. But
no,
my
you're
faith
listen.
walk, my faith walk has been the greatest thing that has happened. Angela and I, our best day of the week is Sunday, because we go to church together. We hear the word together. We read together at night. It's a communal thing to do with a significant other, and with a wife or a husband, and it's a bonding thing, But
Yes.
I'm going to tell a couple more things that I thought about tonight before I was going to come on with you, that I wanted to talk about that have impacted me. If you're okay, Si, if you'd be indulgent
Yes,
with
absolutely.
um, the way I used to look at work, and I always took pride in what I did and wanted to do a good job. Yeah, but there's times when you're tired and it's like, this will do, whatever. I don't look at it that way anymore, because of James 1. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials, because you know that the testing. No, that's a different one. Sorry. Trials. Let's talk about trials. I used to look at everything like I'm a victim, right? Oh, really? If I didn't have bad luck, I'd have no luck, right? That
Right.
kind of stuff. And
Yep.
poor me, and why is this happening to me? And oh, I just want to get through this and past it. Well, rushing through it and past it means you're not going to learn from it, and you're not understanding what it is. We're all given trials, and the reason we're given trials is to grow, and
Yes.
because he's preparing us for something greater. And if you look at it that way, and if you can find joy in the trials, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials.
Yes.
He's not saying, there's good, that rainbow at the end. No, consider it joy. He is challenging you to grow, and he's going to give you all the support you need. So if you look at it that way, you're being chosen. It's a blessing.
Yes.
It's hard to do.
Oh, it's
But then
very
again,
hard. It's
but
very hard. It's
most of Christianity is counter to human nature. We
yes.
have to be against our human tendencies to be more like him. So
Yes.
that's a great one. And I'm going on, I know. Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for men. Since you know that you receive an inheritance in the Lord as a reward, it's the Lord you are serving. So even if I'm mopping a floor up at the business my wife and I own, even if I'm mopping a floor, I'm doing it for him,
Yes.
which means do your best. I don't care how tired I am, do your best. Everything you do, you're doing for him. If you're making a burger in a McDonald's for somebody, do it as
Do it
though
right.
you're serving it
Yep.
to Jesus. Right.
Absolutely.
I love that. And I've learned a respect for the Bible that through my men's group studies and other things, I look at every other book now as though, well, it's okay to read other books too.
Yeah.
But if you haven't read that one, if you haven't figured out what that one's all about, then you're missing the whole picture of why you're on this
Yes.
planet.
Yes.
And one of the things I love is this, 2 Timothy 3:16, all scripture is God breathed from his mouth. through disciples, through the prophets, through his son. It's from him. It's his book, his word. And I love how John refers to him as the word and the lamb. He's the only one that refers to him as the word, but he is the
Exactly.
word.
Yes.
And I just, the more I learn about this side, the more it's fascinating. And, my conversations I've had with you over the past couple of years have been so energizing to me. Your energy is contagious. Your passion for Jesus, your passion for
Thank you.
people.
Thanks.
You're an inspiration. Let's put it that way to me. So I'm honored to be on this podcast with you tonight. I can't even tell you, but
I'm
yeah, this
so
is just,
glad to. And I'm,
yeah.
as I told you before we even started going live, that I never would have imagined our days traveling and
Mm-hmm.
all the heck raising that we did and
Mm-hmm.
all the camaraderie. I had
Yeah. Yeah.
no idea, Dan, that you and I would be on this podcast called Project Resurrection and
Mm-hmm.
talking about how our lives have been retooled. It's an amazing thing. It's an
It
amazing, and
is.
it's all about the
It
journey,
is.
though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's really, you called me out of the blue. It wasn't out of the blue. God knew I needed to hear from somebody, the right person, who was going through something I mean, it was just, there's no coincidences in this world,
It was just perfect. It was
And
perfect.
I will never forget that call, and never forget every call we have together, because it is so inspiring. And your energy rubs off on me, as I'm sure it does on everybody in your
Likewise,
ministry.
well, likewise, but from you as well. And man, but I so appreciate you agreeing to come on, and so
Hmm.
appreciate that you opened up, not just about 9/11, but opening up about your experiences. And we're all flawed at the end of the
Hmm.
day. And you
Yep.
said something earlier about loving. And I agree with you, Dan, because I'm positive I didn't love myself. So I
Hmm.
was incapable, as
Right.
much as I wanted to love everybody around me, without loving yourself first and being
Hmm.
able to be comfortable in your skin and with your
Right.
spirit, it's almost impossible to love somebody else. And to watch you come through this as well
Hmm.
has just been gratifying, and it's a blessing. Even just being friends, as long as we've been friends, it's
Yep.
just
No,
a pure blessing.
it is, to me, it's a blessing too. So I thank you for saying that. Um, Low self-esteem, beating yourself up, looking at yourself negatively. Satan wants you to do that. He absolutely wants you to do
Yeah,
that. Jesus, on the other hand, tells you quite the opposite. What's your problem? You're my child. You're a child of God. Could you get any more? I mean, you're going to be a saint if you believe when you die, you're going to be
yeah,
like me.
right,
Uh, You've got an inheritance waiting for you that is beyond. You are made in my image.
right,
If you don't like yourself, you're telling me that I'm no good, to
exactly.
a certain extent. There's
Yeah,
ways to look at it. I don't mean to exaggerate it, but I have spent most of my life beating myself up, second guessing myself, and I still deal with it. I still
yeah.
sometimes, my wife will call it out to me. She'll look at me and go, you walk with your head down way too much. And I'm like, you're right.
Wow, interesting.
I've got to get my head up. I've got
Yeah,
to, I got to stand straight. When I go to my men's study group, Bible group, every Wednesday night, I come home, my head is right up.
yeah.
It's that burst you need when I read the,
Recharged.
right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's like a 12-hour night of sleep, and I'm ready to go. It is,
absolutely.
and we all need that. We all need it, because the word, the truth, should be your motivation to learn that. And it's amazing how much of other things in my life now I don't worry about.
Mm,
I just trust.
yes.
If you trust in him, he finds a way. He finds a way in his time and his way. But I used to spend my whole life thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I? Oh my God, so
Right.
much. Now I go, whoa, wait a second. I'm acting like I'm in this alone. He
Right.
gets ticked off. Jesus looking at us like, stupid. Hello, I'm
Yes.
right here. Open
Yes.
the door. I've been telling you. Can I make it any clearer? It's one of the things I love
Exactly.
about the Bible, is the directness of it. I'm a New York City guy. You know
Yeah.
me.
Yes.
I'll tell you the way it is, and I want to hear it the way it is. Well, the
Exactly.
Bible tells it the way it is, and
Yes,
I
it
love
does.
that about
It does, man.
it.
But you know what, brother? Thank you so much for coming on. I'm in your
Thank you.
corner. I'm
Hmm.
always praying for you. I'm always
Thank
rooting
you.
for you. We're
Likewise, Si.
we're
Hmm.
yeah, thank you. We're only a phone call away. We keep up with each other on social media, but Man, thanks. And what a blessing. And thanks for sharing your story, man. I appreciate that. You made my night.
Oh, thank you. This has been a blessing and a treat for me to sit and talk with you a long distance, but to see your
Yes.
face and to chat and to thank you for giving me the chance to tell my testimony and my feelings about all this stuff. I'm very passionate about Jesus and about learning more about him and nobody wants to die, but I know that when I die, I'm going to meet him. And my number one wish in this life is that he looks at me and says, "Well done, my faithful servant."
I have a feeling that he'll say that.
I know I'm flawed. I know I'm
Yes,
flawed.
as
Right.
I myself, sir.
But if we believe his word, we're forgiven.
Yes, we are.
And Cy, thank you so much for this opportunity, man.
No,
Always great to see you, brother. I love you. I'm in your corner too. If you need anything from me, 24/7, you ring me up. Okay.
brother, I appreciate that. And thanks for coming on Project Resurrection, the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, the legendary Dan Murphy. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.
Appreciate you.
Love you, brother. Talk to
All
you
right,
soon,
man.
man.
You got it. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.